Hi, I'm Russ Webb, and I'm the National Registrar for the Canadian Professional Counselling Association. And as a part of individuals who want to become members of the the CPCA, we have a qualifying exam. And this is the first video of a 3-part video to help you prepare for the exam. This video, in my estimation, is kind of understanding the mechanics of the exam. Understanding how it works, being able to kind of see it and get a feel for it so that you have a sense of comfort, so that you know what it is that it looks like and how it works. So let's take a look at this process in the CPCA exam. So first of all, the exam is produced by class marker. And to ensure that you actually have a good testing experience, they actually have some recommendations in terms of when you're taking your test. First, before you actually start your test, it's really important that you do it in an environment where you're not going to be disturbed, obviously with a computer that's plugged in, not on a battery, and where it is you're going to have the amount of time that you need to do the exam. Secondly, your answers are saved as you submit each one. You don't have to worry about saving anything at the end of the test. This means that you will not lose any of your work in the process of taking the test. And if the test has a time limit, which your test does, you will see a countdown clock along the top bar of each page. And if you run out of time, the test will be finished automatically, and your answers on the current page will be actually also submitted for you, so you won't lose any of your work. And lastly, you need to avoid using the browser back button. Don't use the browser back button. If the test is set to allow you to go back, which it is, to previous questions, you can use the previous button, which is under your questions. How to avoid being logged out of a test? Well, stay connected to the internet during your test. And secondly, do not click away from the test until you have submitted your answers and actually finished the test. So for all of your tests, these tests are proctored, and so you should only have one screen open and one tab on your browser. And that is the tab that is taking the test. If you need to type answers, and there are a few questions that are typewritten answers, type your answers in the answer boxes under each question, not on a separate application like Windows or Word or anything like that. You should never actually leave the tab of the browser that you're actually using the test, or that is in the test itself. And if there's issues, if your test page freezes, you can also click refresh on your web browser, and the test will actually load again on the same question that you were actually on. If you have any long answers on a frozen page, make a copy of these answers first so that you don't lose them. In other words, highlight them and hit Control-C for copying, and then refresh. This has not been a problem with this exam. This is just in the worst case kind of scenario. And if your computer or web browser has a problem or they're closed, using the same web browser, reopen the web browser and go to the start link for your test. And you will be taken back to the same or the last question that you were actually on, where you will be able to just continue on with your test. So it will take you to where you left off. So if for some reason there was a problem with the web browser and it glitches out, you can restart the web browser, go back into the test, and continue from where you were. And I have saved my test, but how do I resume it? Well, some tests allow you to save and finish later. Our tests, or for the qualifying exam, does not allow for that option. And I have forgotten my password. You don't need a password. The password will be provided to your proctor, and the proctor will type in or give you the password for entering into the exam. So in terms of setting up your qualifying exam, after your application and your upgrade request with the CPCA has been approved, you'll receive an email stating that you are now eligible to take the online qualifying exam. Secondly, in this same email will be a Proctor declaration form, which you will need to fill out by arranging for an acceptable proctor. You'll need to find an individual who will proctor your exam, who has a good reputation and does not have a dual relationship with you. In other words, this individual cannot be your instructor, previous or future instructor, cannot be a relative or a close friend, present or future employer, or anyone with whom you have a conflict of interest and someone who does not have invested interest in the outcome of the exam. And you need to, with this individual, arrange a location, a day, and a time for your exam with your proctor, not with us. Then you fill out the Proctor declaration form with that information, and you send it in to submissions at thecpca.ca. So let's take a look at an actual Proctor declaration form so that you're familiar with it. And so here we have, this is a fictitious individual, Jenny Smith. I'm really hoping we don't have a member who's Jenny Smith, but I just made up the name, who lives in Vancouver. And you can see that she needs to still fill in the date of the exam sitting. And this has obviously been arranged with her proctor, and 8:30 a.m. and make sure that you also put the time zone. So if you're in Vancouver, obviously it's Pacific Standard Time, but if you are in Mountain Standard Time, or if you are in an Eastern province, you need to put what time zone you're going to be starting the test. Just so we're clear, even if you are a little bit late and your test doesn't start till 8, let's say 8:35, even 8:40, you will still be given exactly 4 hours for completing the exam. So your exam time will not change. So even if you are a little bit frazzled and something happened and you couldn't arrive and the bus was late or whatever it is, it doesn't matter as long as your proctor is there and you are there. Once you start the exam, that's when the clock starts to tick. The proctor name, Glenn Thompson, and this is a fictitious person, their email address, and what their professional title is and their location. So does it have to be a clinician? No, this person is actually a librarian. So this is the top half of the form. We're going to just kind of slide it up, and so you can see in terms of sliding up that the Proctor declaration must be completed and received at the CPCA office no later than 2 weeks prior to the exam sitting date. The online QE link and password will be sent to the applicant by email, and the proctor instructions will be emailed to the proctor. So, and then the Jenny confirms that the above information is true and confirms that there's no conflict of interest in her relationship with her proctor, and she needs to sign it digitally and enter in the date. Saves this form to her computer and then emails it to submissions at our email address. So after you've actually sent in your proctor declaration form, then your proctor will be given an email with the proctor instructions. And here's a copy of the proctor instructions that will be sent to Glenn. And he actually needs to fill it in and forward it back to the CPCA as well. So these proctor declaration for the qualifying exam, this proctor declaration or this proctor instruction is specifically for RPC-C. There's a different one for RPC and MPCCS or MPCC. And so the instructions are a bit different. And for RPC-C, you can see that notes and textbooks are permitted for an RPC-C exam. This is not true for for RPC or MPCC. Those are closed book exams. But if we kind of zoom in on these details, you can see that the examinee and their computer screen must be under direct in-person observation or line of sight for the duration of the exam by the proctor. The examinee may have no access to any other devices. Textbooks and personal course notes are permitted for RPCCs. And with the exception of the computer and an open tab for the online qualifying exam, no other tabs may be open. There is a time limit, and the proctor at the beginning of the test gives certain attestations, and I'll show that so you understand what we're talking about. And it's 4 hours. Photo ID must be viewed to verify the identification of the examinee, and there is no provision for a break once the exam has begun. In case of an emergency, should the examinee be required to leave prior to the completion of the exam may not be resumed or reopened and will be considered invalid. The exam will be repeated in its entirety at a later date. And number 7, proctor's signature attesting to the compliance with these instructions is required below in the form. And when time is up, the examinee is finished. Whichever comes first, the proctor is to return this document to the CPCA head office, again to submissions. So by fax or by email. So this is the proctor instruction sheet that they get. So when we're thinking about actually taking your QE, you will receive an email with a link, and the link will look something like this. And once you have that link, you can actually click on it at any point, but your proctor will only have the password for opening up the exam. And on the exam day, of course, you will meet at the location that you decided with your proctor. You will use the link, so you'll need to have access and open up your email with the link, and you then click on the link to open up your exam. The proctor will enter in the password or give you the password to enter in to open up your exam. And then you will go through some preliminary instructions, as well as the proctor will need to answer 4 questions that are not part of the exam at all. And then once the red start button is pushed, the first question will emerge, and then the exam actually starts. And you'll see the time. That'll be a countdown clock from 4 hours. And then you just take the exam 1 question at a time. So how does this actually look? Well, I'm going to try clicking on this, and hopefully this works so we can open up an exam. Is it going to open? Ah, yes, it did. So you can see I have way too many tabs open at the top, but here is an actual, I'm going to make it a bit bigger. So you can see here is, I call it the video tutorial example test. This isn't the real test, obviously, but this is what it looks like. And if you click here, you can put in the password once it's given to you. And I made the password for this one, puppy1234. Anyway, just for fun. And then you click continue. And this is where, I don't want to save the password, you'll put in your first name and your last name and your email address. There we go. And then as you go down, you'll see that there are some proctor questions. Please allow the proctor to answer these questions. As a proctor for this exam, do you verify that you are in the same room as the examinee? that's assuming that my proctor is actually answering this. As proctor, are you in full view of the examinee's computer screen for this exam? And as an exam proctor, do you verify that you will remain in the room in full view of the examinee's computer for the entire exam? And last question, if the examinee is writing for their RPC or MPCC designation, do you as a proctor verify that the examinee has no access to any books, texts, notes, educational materials, electronic devices, or any other extra internet tabs open for the entire exam? And this is where if it is an RPC or MPC exam, hopefully they can put yes. Or if it is not an RPC exam, you simply put this is not an exam for an RPC or MPCC designation. And here is the red start button. Once you hit start, then the exam will actually begin. So let's try. Oops, not quite. There's a few more instructions. And so it tells you the number of questions in the exam. And so for this fake exam, there are 4 questions, and I have 4 hours, so I can take a long time. And it's 1 question per displayed at a time. And you are allowed to go back and change your answers if you'd like. And you will not let you finish with any questions unattempted. Will not let you finish any questions not attempted. That's true. Once the exam is over, the exam is over. And so then we hit the continue button. And here we go. You can see that the exam has started, and here's the time. It's counting down from 4 hours, and there's a bar that will slowly become red that gives you a sense of how much time you have left, or if you're halfway through. And here you can see question 1. How many cigars did Sigmund Freud smoke in his lifetime? And this is an example of the kind of question we will never ask you. This is kind of a detail-oriented question that has nothing to do with the practicalities of what it means to be a clinician. So the specifics of dates, times, these kind of numbers are really quite meaningless when it comes to professional practice. So this is an example of the kind of question we do not ever have on the exam. And you can see that there's a little tab here, and let's say that I've been going through a number of questions, but it's like, I'm not sure of this one. I can answer it, 14,000, complete guess. But I want to put a tab on it because I might want to go back later just to kind of review that particular question. Done that question, I click next. The next question comes up, and who is the author of narrative therapy? And you might think, oh, this might be a good question on the exam. No, it's not. This is another example of the kind of exam question we will never ask you because it doesn't really pertain to the practice of clinical counseling. Now, narrative therapy is a wonderful theoretical approach, or counseling approach to work with individuals, couples and families for that matter, but does it make a difference as to whether or not you know the individual who actually wrote or came up with narrative therapy? No. But even in this list, I know it's not Simon Cowell. Anyway, but it happens to be Michael White. So I'm going to click Next. Now you'll see that some questions actually need a written answer. Identify 5 different types of empathy and give an example of each. Now, again, this is a crazy question because there aren't 5 different types of empathy. But what is important in this question is to make sure that you answer all parts of the question. And you can see that there's actually 2 different parts. This question may be worth 8 points. And if you only just write down and identify the 5 types, you will then not get full points. You will only get the 5 points or 4 points rather than the 8 points for giving an example of each. So again, this is a fictitious question, but the idea of the question and making sure that you answer all parts of the question is really important. And then you can, it's like I can go previous, right? I want to go back to that other question, and I go to that particular question. And it's like I can change the question by hitting previous and hit next. But how do I, if I go up to the top of the question, top of the test, you can see all questions. And you can see that one of the questions, here has a little tag. It is bookmarked, question number 1. And it's like, that's the one that I know out of all the questions I had a problem with and I wanted to review. And I can click on it and go back to question number 1. I can then go back and realize that I haven't finished all my questions, and so I'll go back to question 3. So you can go back and forth to whatever question you want to within the exam. And so this is not a great question, and so this is not a great answer. But remember that it's fake. Then we click next, and we come to our last question. Replacing negative thoughts with positive ones would most likely be useful for most clients. B, useful for most clinicians. C, useful before taking a qualifying exam. Yeah. Or not useful at all. Well, I think it's this one. And then once this is the last question of the exam, you click Finish Now and confirm Finish Now. And that's it. It gives you the time, the duration of the exam, the date of the exam, finish, thank you, your answers have been saved for review. And that is the mechanics of the qualifying exam for the CPCA qualifying exam. I hope this is helpful to you so that you get a sense of how the exam takes place. In the next 2 videos, we'll take a look at how do you prepare for the exam, as well as how do you emotionally prepare for the exam in terms of looking at the issue of anxiety and stress. I hope these will be helpful to you. Thanks.